Hello, everyone. Welcome. So, a little bit about Molly, whom I'm sure you all know. Molly Gray serves as the executive director of the Vermont Afghan Alliance. Previously, Molly served as Vermont's 82nd lieutenant governor, right? Yay! From 2018 to 2020, she served as a Vermont Assistant Attorney General while also teaching international human rights law at Vermont Law and Graduate School. Before that, Molly worked in Geneva, Switzerland for the International Code of Conduct Association, an international initiative aimed at overseeing the compliance of security contractors with human rights. Molly launched the association's human rights monitoring program and led missions into East Africa, Nigeria, and Iraq. Molly also previously worked for the International Committee of the Red Cross, where she managed relations with Congress, that was good, and led missions to Haiti, Uganda, Georgia, the Balkans, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's on the second page. Republic of Congo. Wait a second. Wow. All right. Yes. No. 1 minute. Oh, boy. I should have ripped that off before. Molly began her career as an aide to U.S. Representative, now Senator Peter Welch. She lives in Burlington with her husband, stepkids, and son Jack. Please give a really warm welcome to Molly Gray.
Thank you, Carol.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum, as our Afghan clients and staff say to each other in greeting. Welcome. Before I begin, a couple of ground rules. If at some point I am speaking too fast, give me the thumbs down, and I won't take it personally. And if at some point you can't hear me and I'm speaking too quietly, give me the raise it up a bit, okay? We have about 35 minutes for presentation. I'm going to try to stick to that, but I love questions and I love hearing from people. So I really want to make sure we have plenty of time to engage. So 35 minutes of presentation, about 20 to 25 minutes of questions. And let's begin. We're going to start with some history around Afghanistan and US involvement. Then we're going to talk about the growing Afghan community in Vermont, which is the largest population of Afghans per capita in the United States. We're going to talk a little bit about the work of the Vermont Afghan Alliance, the nonprofit that I help lead, and then a little bit about where we're at today. This is not a political conversation. We are a nonpartisan organization. But I would be remiss if I didn't share with you the impacts of current immigration policy on this population specifically. And then we're going to close with something hopeful, which is, what do you do with all that you've learned today when you leave this room? Okay? So here we go. The United States, as many of you probably know, was involved in Afghanistan for 21 years. And I'm curious if there's anyone in the room who served in Afghanistan, worked in Afghanistan, have loved ones who maybe served or worked in Afghanistan. Show of hands. See 1, 2, 3, 4 in the back. I will show personally that I graduated from high school in 2006, not many years after the United States went into Afghanistan, shortly after 9/11. And most of my generation, most of my young life, I will share with you that I'm almost 41, really was around the U.S. involvement in either Afghanistan or Iraq. My brother served in Iraq. So most of my adult life, the United States has been in Afghanistan. And I want you to think about that as you think about the individuals who are now here. For many of the people we serve, their entire childhood and much of their entire life, the United States was in Afghanistan. So just to give some depth to the period of time. So the United States withdrew from Afghanistan in August of 2021. You all may remember watching CNN or MSNBC or BBC or wherever you get your news and seeing day after day after day these images, right? Images of Afghans trying to get on planes, trying to get to the airport. And what we know today is that the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan included the evacuation of 125,000 individuals in a 2-week time period. That is the largest civilian evacuation, mostly civilian evacuation in U.S. history. Pretty remarkable. However, there were 150,000 special immigrant visa holders left behind. 150,000. And you're probably wondering, and maybe some of you know, what is a special immigrant visa holder? A special immigrant visa holder is someone who, because of their work with the United States, were promised an immigration pathway to U.S. citizenship. And the first stop on that pathway is what's called a special immigrant visa. It allows you to come to the United States, get a green card, and then be on your pathway to citizenship. So 150,000 special immigrant visa holders were left in Afghanistan. So the evacuation did not end at the end of August in 2021. To be transparent, the United States has been evacuating people from Afghanistan for the last 3 years, 4 months, 5 weeks, and we can count the days until January 20th of this last year, which we'll get into more at the end of the presentation. So the evacuations continued. Who was evacuated? Not only were some individuals who worked with the US government, but individuals who worked for rule of law projects, ministers, justices, a Supreme Court Justice, Justice Anisa Rasooli, the first woman to serve on the Afghan Supreme Court, lives now here in Vermont. Individuals who worked for the US military, for the CIA, for all sorts of agricultural, educational programs, USAID projects. If you think about 21 years of US involvement in Afghanistan, the number of people who were involved in all sorts of sectors, in all parts of the country at every level is pretty significant. So I just ask that you keep that in mind as you think about the relationship that the US has had with this country. And I'll also say this, oftentimes we say Afghan refugees. Even my husband this morning said, the refugees. And I said, Mike, let's break down what it means to be a refugee. A refugee is someone who has left one country and had to flee to another. In legal terms, in legal terms, that's a P1 or P2. With Afghanistan, there are the special immigrant visa holders, but there's also asylum seekers. So the individuals that fit into those 3 different categories, but we often say Afghan refugees. The only reason that the Afghans living in Vermont and the United States today are refugees is because the United States made them refugees. And for that reason, I think we have to use a different term, and that term is ally. Afghan allies and Afghan veterans. So I'm going to try throughout my presentation to use that terminology because I think it's more accurate as it relates to this community. So a little bit about the evacuation, and then I'm taking you to Vermont. So today, Vermont's home, and home is my word. Many Afghans today, their children and their wives are still in Afghanistan. They were promised that their wives and kids would be evacuated within 1 year, and it's been 3.5. So I say home, but home is a feeling, and I don't think everyone feels home yet in Vermont. I think that hearts are in Afghanistan and heads are here in the state and in body. So 600 Afghans are resettled in the state, largest population in the nation per capita. There are also many in-migrants, so individuals who were originally arriving in Texas or Nebraska and hear about the 19,000 jobs open in Vermont and want to come here. There's a lot of rural resettlement happening. It's a tough word, rural resettlement. Originally in Vermont, resettlement of refugees was happening in the Colchester or Greater Burlington area. Over the last 2 or 3 years, resettlement of refugees, in this case Afghans, our Afghan allies, has begun in new communities, which is pretty special. So Brattleboro, Bennington, Rutland, Montpelier, Hartford, St. Albans. Where am I forgetting on my map? And then the Greater Burlington area, so here in Shelburne, Williston, South Burlington, Winooski. So all across the state, new American populations are growing and developing. And again, lots of different backgrounds. So former Supreme Court justices, engineers, former police officers, individuals who serve with the US military. All coming from different parts of Afghanistan, speaking either Pashto or Dari. Pashto generally coming from the Pashtun tribe, closer to Pakistan and that affiliation. Dari speakers sometimes are Farsi speakers, generally more Persian with Iranian connection or influence, but many, many tribes that have not always got along, and many individuals of different languages. So that in itself has been quite an education, I'll share with you personally. And then both individuals, so many, many men, I would say a majority of individuals are men who were evacuated on their own, and then families, some mothers who are here on their own with kids, but all in some form waiting for true family reunification to happen. So who are we, the Vermont Afghan Alliance? We are the VAA. Some staff call us the Vermont Afghan Airlines or Vermont Afghan Aliens, but we're the Vermont Afghan Alliance. We were founded by a former Navy SEAL who served in Afghanistan and an Afghan man who went to school here in Vermont and had hoped to return to Afghanistan, but then arrived back in 2021, saw the writing on the wall, came back to Vermont. They came together in the fall of 2021 when the first Afghans started arriving in the state to try to figure out how could they help, where were the gaps. And they saw the greatest need in driving lessons. As you know, you cannot live in Vermont without a car. I mean, it's really tough, right? And especially if resettlement started happening, in this case, outside of the Burlington area. So they raised $25,000, bought a Toyota Corolla that we still have, and started getting as many people through the Vermont road tests and onto the road and into jobs as possible. I joined their effort I was first working with them in an advisory capacity, but in 2023, I was 7 months pregnant, and my husband jokes that there are 2 births that happened in 2023, the Alliance in its sort of newer, bigger form, and my son Jack, who's now 20 months old. But we worked very quickly to get some funding from the state of Vermont, but also from the federal government, Health and Human Services, to have a real driving program with commercial driving insurance and a driver's ed car with a handbrake. Hamid, who is on your screen you can't see him very well, but on the left-hand side, he was an interpreter in Afghanistan. He now runs the driving program, and he speaks Dari and Pashto. Drukshan, to his right, was the first Afghan woman to graduate from Norwich University and joined us as a case manager, helping with interpretation. Both Drukshan and Hamid cannot return to Afghanistan because of their affiliation with the military. And we were very, very lucky in December of 2023 to open an office in Burlington at 60 Main Street in Burlington with help from Governor Scott and Senator Welch. So today we provide a whole variety of services, which I want to tell you a little bit about. But importantly, our organization is truly led by the Afghan community. I am there, but I will step aside at some point. I really just pay the bills and keep the lights on and try to stay out of the way. But the majority of the staff are Afghan, so Afghan allies and veterans who are here now helping their fellow Afghans navigate this country and the community. Our board is also 50% Afghan, so really trying to embody a true alliance between individuals who had the luck of being born in Vermont and individuals who are here starting their new journey. So a little bit about the driving program. Hamid continues to provide lessons. Many of the people he tries to teach, they are unable to read or write in their own language. So giving them the Vermont driver's manual just doesn't work. And Hamid was able to have the DMV translate the manual into Pashto and Dari, which was wonderful. But it means that there's a lot of time just spent in the car, in parking lots, on dirt roads, going through the steps of learning how to parallel park, how to do that Vermont turnaround. This is the trusty Corolla that's still going strong. And 40 members of the community got their Vermont road test, or Vermont license, passed the road test last year, including 10 Afghan women, and including a woman here from Shelburne who's here on her own with 3 kids. It's been, for me, this is like the most exciting work that we do. It's such a celebration when someone passed the road test. And we remind people that you don't always pass on the first try, and that's okay. And we also work to support employment. This is everything from resume building to looking at someone's prior experience and trying to find a job that is most closely associated to that prior experience. And by this I mean it's really hard to find a position for abdominal surgeon. This is the latest challenge that we have. There's a woman who was the first female abdominal surgeon in Afghanistan, here in Vermont. And with all the licensing requirements, she can't continue to do that work. So we're trying to find what is the best position where she can stay connected to the medical field and utilize that experience. That's an ongoing piece of our work with the employment program, but also trying to find good Vermont businesses who are willing to employ Afghans, create a culturally appropriate and culturally friendly workplace, and really take the extra steps to make sure people can succeed. Sometimes it's incorporating English language instruction into the daily working environment, making sure that Ramadan, which is happening right now, is observed within the place of work. So we work really closely with Peerless, which is in St. Albans. Recently visited Beta, the electric airplane company. As you know, they're building, I think they have hundreds of planes they're supposed to build, so they need workers and people to work along the production line. We also provide a tremendous amount of case management support, and this is everything from how to get to a doctor's appointment, how to schedule a doctor's appointment, interpretation during a doctor's appointment or a dentist's appointment, navigating the US and Vermont health system, which even as an English speaker, right, is complicated. Medicaid and Medicare, when do both of those apply? We also do a lot of immigration legal assistance. We just hired an immigration attorney to support many individuals who are still waiting on their green cards. And until someone gets their green card, they can't apply for their family to come. I'll share with you personally that before I came here today, there were 2 men who were in the office who have been waiting for 3.5 years for their green card. And it just breaks your heart to see them break down, you know, with pictures of their boys and girls, their kids on their phone, constantly calling back home, sending every penny that they have back to Afghanistan because loved ones, wives and kids who are in hiding are really dependent on that money. The work is not done. the work is absolutely not done with the Afghan community, and there's still a mountain of immigration work, a mountain of, I guess, opportunity to support transition and engagement within the community here. And I just shared this because I love this picture because every time there's a green card interview, just like when someone passes the road test, we try to celebrate that in some small way. So there were 5 green card interviews on this day. We also run 2 statewide training programs. We call them our signature training programs, one on civic engagement, and we call them like community forums. So we train on local government and then have elected officials, select board members, representatives come in and engage with their new constituents. Sometimes we see situations where refugees, no matter what issue comes up, they're sort of sent back to refugee organizations to help solve an issue. And we hope that our work is part of maybe the first stop of someone's experience in the United States, but quickly elected officials know their new constituents and know that they might not speak English. But just because they don't speak English and they're not born in Williston or Shelburne or this area doesn't mean that their concerns about the sidewalks or the potholes or the school system are any less important. And that it's also our elected officials' obligation to help them understand all the services and tools that are available and to make sure things are truly accessible in the state. So we love these forums. They've been very well attended. There are many individuals who have registered to vote and are on their pathway to citizenship. So the next step is training and support for the citizenship process. You'll see on the right-hand side 2 gentlemen who registered to vote and voted for their first female mayor of Burlington last year. In Burlington, there's taxpayer voting. So if you are a resident, you can vote on local issues, not on state issues or federal issues, but you can vote on local issues, which is really exciting in terms of getting people engaged civically from the early start of their career or of their time in Vermont. We also run a statewide legal rights training program. So training on what happens if you get stopped by the police? What does it mean to be pulled over? What are your rights if you're arrested? On family rights and what may be different here in the United States, prevention of child abuse, prevention of domestic abuse. Last year we partnered with the Vermont State Police, which was a lot of fun. There's something about the people who pull you over coming in to teach you on that process that everyone really enjoyed. I don't know why. I thought it was kind of funny, but and we had separate trainings for men and women to really give both groups the chance to ask all sorts of questions that come up. And we do these trainings all across Vermont, so Brattleboro, Bennington, Montpelier, Rutland, and then the greater Burlington area. Last year, we piloted a special English language program. I don't know if there's any English language instructors in the group. One, good. A couple, yes, yeah. It turns out it's really hard to teach individuals English if they can't read or write in their own language. And there's not a lot of curriculum out there that is set up for pre-literate, that's what we call pre-literate, if someone's unable to read or write in their own language, learners. So we last year designed a unique curriculum for pre-literate learners. In this case, many men who are in their late 20s, early 30s, even their 40s, who can't read or write. And the goal was to create an introduction to emergency English for the workplace, for day-to-day life, to try to create more employment opportunities and to really give them a basis of support for when their family arrives. And then twice a year, and it's Ramadan right now, Ramadan Mubarak to anyone who's observing, we provide cultural celebrations. So opportunities for the community, especially those who are separated for loved ones, to come together for food, dancing. There's lots of dancing and celebration. So this year we'll celebrate Eid al-Fitr at the end of Ramadan in Burlington at the Champlain Elementary School. We're looking for volunteers if you're interested in cutting carrots or setting up tables or supporting the celebration in any way. And then Eid al-Adha, which happens in celebration of sacrifice, which happens, I believe it's at the end of June or beginning of July this year. So that was a dramatic shift, sorry, with not a lot of warning. So I wanted to take the remaining, I'm running like 5 maybe to 10 minutes to just bring you up to speed with where we are today. And I want to preface this again by saying we are not a political organization. We are distinctly apolitical. Our work is neutral, it's independent, it's humanitarian, and it's focused on need. But the world really changed over the last, what's today? Today's the 7th of March, over the last 6 weeks. I shared this picture because this is a picture of the executive order that President Trump signed on the night he was inaugurated. This is the executive order that stopped all refugee admissions into the United States. Or paused admissions, although we're not sure when or if there will be an unpausing. And what do I mean by that? It really meant that any individuals who had fled Afghanistan into Pakistan, and there's thousands of Afghans in Pakistan in hiding and waiting for evacuation to the United States, those individuals, many of whom were judges, prosecutors, work within the judicial system, elected officials. There's a former female lieutenant governor. There's a former deputy minister of justice, individuals who worked very closely with the U.S. government who have been waiting to get onto a plane to come to the U.S. And they were vetted, so fully vetted by the U.S. government. Their medical clearance was done. But then all flights were essentially grounded after January 20th. So that was on the first day of the new presidency. On Thursday that week, this is the first week of the new administration, the Department of Homeland Security issued a memorandum revoking what's called humanitarian parole. And humanitarian parole is a process by which the United States government, generally Congress, says, if you're from certain countries where we know there is a conflict going on, and we don't have time to go through an extensive immigration process, we're going to allow you to come into the United States. We're going to parole you into the United States and allow you to apply for asylum. And that's essentially what the United States did in August of 2021, right? During that very chaotic withdrawal, the US said, you can come into the US from Afghanistan. We're going to allow you in under humanitarian parole, and then you need to either apply for asylum or have your special immigrant visa issued. Some individuals, like the 2 that I mentioned earlier who were in my office this morning, the US government still has not verified their employment with the US government, despite them having all of their records. And it's just a records issue. And so that means that they were waiting for their special immigrant visas, but now are subject to deportation, possibly even to Guantanamo, which is hard to wrap your head around if you know the history around Guantanamo and Afghans. And so now they're applying for asylum, which you may say, well, what's the difference? Why does it matter if you apply for asylum or a special immigrant visa? The difference is that if you work for the US government, you're entitled to a special immigrant visa. If you're applying for asylum, you have to say, if I go back to Afghanistan, I will be killed, right? It's a credible fear of persecution. But many of these men, their wives and kids are still in hiding in Afghanistan, and they are returning. They're returning for a short amount of time, under the radar, as safely as they possibly can, because they are so desperate to keep a connection with their wives and kids. And they know that if they return to Afghanistan with a green card that comes from the root of that green card is asylum, then they may be in a place where the US government says, well, you told me you would be killed if you went back to Afghanistan. We're taking away your green card. I know that's a bit complicated to understand, and I hope I explained it well, but the fact that any Afghans would be subject to deportation was really, really shocking and has created kind of a rush to get new immigration documents completed. On Friday, so we had Monday, plane stop, and no refugees could come into the United States. Thursday, we had the Homeland Security memo saying that no more humanitarian parole for Afghans. Friday, a stop work order went out to all refugee organizations across the United States saying there's no more money for you and no more money for the refugees you serve. We were not impacted by that, but USCRI, ECDC, the two designated refugee resettlement organizations working in Vermont were. And that means that even refugees who had just arrived here, who were entitled to support, were left without support. And then Monday, so we had the Monday action, the Thursday action, the Friday action. Then the following Monday, the Office of Management and Budget, the White House Office of Management and Budget, put out a memorandum freezing all federal funding for pretty much anyone who was receiving federal funding through grants, ourselves included. So I went into our payment management system, this federal system, to draw down funds for our driving program, for our Afghan program officers, to pay our rent, and couldn't get into our system. We were blocked for 3 weeks. I'll tell you the good news. Yesterday, a federal judge in Rhode Island issued a preliminary injunction. So we do have access to our funds again. We expect that the administration will appeal to the Supreme Court. So we really are unsure of what the future will look like. But the sadness from my perspective, and now I'm getting a little emotional and I'm steering a little bit away from the facts, is just that these are Afghan allies. As I said, these are individuals who really risk their lives for the US military and for US diplomatic missions. And they're here giving the state and our communities everything that they have and still fighting for their families. I just don't understand why they're also being targeted. I don't understand a lot of things, but I don't understand why they're being targeted and abandoned. So I'm not going to leave you with that. I'm actually going to leave you with something a little more positive. And this is an invitation to join us in our work. And I know we'll have lots of time for questions, but we're not going to be stopped. We're not going to be stopped. We're going to continue to provide driving lessons, even if we have to just raise money here in Vermont. We're going to get gas in the tank and pay for commercial driving insurance and make sure all the women who want to drive learn to drive. We're still going to work to do our employment work and help folks find the best jobs where they can make the most money and have that economic security. We're definitely going to continue on with our English language program. Our hope is to continue with the community forums because we do think it makes for a much more diverse and strengthened state and for the community. But I guess I invite you to, one, share what you've learned today with anyone who will listen, your grandkids, your kids, your neighbors, because what we're doing in Vermont is pretty unique, honestly, with piloting rural resettlement and really helping this community thrive. We do have volunteer opportunities. That could be driving a family. That could be helping someone learn English or practice their English. We need help with our QuickBooks and writing thank you letters sometimes. There's all sorts of things. So there's lots of opportunities. And then every dollar right now, honestly, helps keep gas in the tank. The VAA tank, our metaphorical tank, but also truly our little Toyota Corolla that's zipping around northern Vermont, helping people pass the road test. So with that, it's 2:35 on the dot. I'm going to pause, and I'd really love to open it up for questions, conversation, anything you'd like to ask or share. I will ask that you do not speak until you have the microphone so that everyone has a chance to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
I know you did.
Hey, thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask you a question which you sort of touched on, and it's a fundamental one to me, and that is the road to citizenship for these people. And that route has got to take its way through learning the English language. And I realize that there are many of these people cannot read or write. I understand that. And they may be the older part of that community. But there must be some within that community who can now speak English. So I'd like to know if they are moving towards citizenship through a citizenship course. Are you taking the others who would like to learn English so they can become proficient and move in the same direction? Because I do not look very positively upon a right which we have as citizens to vote. I just don't think that's the right approach. So thanks.
Thank you so much for your question. It's a really important one, this question around learning English, not only because of what it means for everyday life and the ability to really thrive in Vermont and wherever you live in the United States. There is a reluctance, I think sometimes in this moment, from what I witness from the Afghan community, because of this, how do I put it, like constantly living still today in triage. Because imagine if you were given 6 hours to grab your things to get into a convoy, and you were told, don't worry, leave your children and wife behind. They will be with you in 1 year. And then you arrive in a new place, Vermont, and you are placed or decide to live congregately because you know it's going to be the most affordable thing. And then you end up working in a factory where maybe some of the same individuals you live with, you're going to work with, and you're sending every penny home, and you're just working as hard as you can to make sure that your immigration process goes quickly so that your wives and kids can come. But this hasn't just dragged on for 6 months or 1 year or year and a half or 2 years. It's dragged on for 3.5 years. And I guess I've tried to have a lot of patience and compassion for those individuals who they're just struggling to survive right now and struggling to understand, will the US government ever bring my family here? Or will I have to return to Afghanistan? It would be a real shame. That would be, in my mind, a horrible situation. One, because we need people to stay here. Frankly, I mean, now I'm going to put my former lieutenant governor hat on. 19,000 job openings, a shrinking workforce, one of the oldest states in the nation in terms of a population that's retiring. Congratulations, some of you have retired. But we absolutely have to have workers. And to have invested so much and to have people leave because of the inhumanity of being separated from your wives, a family separation policy is really unfair. So we're working both with some carrots and sticks, right? The carrots are like, we will help you learn English. We will help you prepare for citizenship. We are going to help you get into jobs that are the best suited for you. But at some point, if you continue to come into the office and have us do the same interpretation work over and over and over again, year after year, month after month, we have to say our work is done because we have to build self-sufficiency and we don't want to hinder people on their path. Our next phase is to help design a program for those who are now have their green cards, and the next stop is the citizenship exam. I think it will take a few years for that process, but it's definitely an ongoing one. And English is everything. I mean, it's just, we have to accept that it is the greatest tool to economic security in Vermont. Maybe that and a driver's license.
I must remind you, they're not going to move ahead in their job without OEP.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I saw this morning that now there's a danger that the Ukrainians who are allowed to come here under a special program may also be deported. And they came with conditions of having money, having a sponsor in the U.S., a lot of things that other immigrant groups weren't required to have, and yet they're still not safe from this administration. And the first article I read didn't even mention any other groups, but the second article said that then the Afghans may be deported too, and that hundreds of thousands of people from Cuba and Central American countries who also came here under a special program now also face deportation. So in some sense, we know that the administration's approach is to throw as much stuff at you as they can, and you just can't catch it all. But in an opportunity like this, where there's so many groups affected, is there a way to band together all these different groups and say, no, this is how we fight it, and not just the Afghans are fighting for their, stay, Ukrainians. It's hard not to get upset every day when you look at the news.
Yeah, tell me about it. No, it's really, really hard, and it was like one punch after another, and it still is. I mean, we last week heard rumors of a travel ban, and it's pretty much confirmed at this point that the administration will ban individuals traveling from Pakistan or Afghanistan to the United States. The United States will attempt to ban travel by individuals from Afghanistan or Pakistan to the United States. I don't know other countries that will be on that list, but it's hard to know what to do when you're constantly facing one thing after another that will impact not just the Afghan community, but the Ukrainian community, the Venezuelan community, the Haitian community. We work very closely with the different organizations in Vermont, and I want to take a moment to highlight the different organizations. There's obviously USCRI, a designated resettlement agency here in the greater Burlington area, ECDC in the southern Vermont. There's the Vermont Asylum Assistance Project. There's CVRAN in Montpelier. I would say we are all talking regularly and trying to share resources. All of the attorneys are talking regularly. Can I take this case from you and take this off your desk? Can we share resources and trying to figure out what we can do? But it's very, very hard. It's very hard. And then also trying to really appreciate and recognize the different experiences. The Ukrainian experience is different than the Venezuelan experience, which is different from the Afghan experience. And I guess with the Afghan community, again, to go back to allies, that we made them refugees. The United States made them refugees. And there is a responsibility. Yes.
Oh,
Maybe we'll go.
all right. I'll get you.
How many Afghan children are attending public schools in Vermont?
Oh my. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I would say there's roughly 300 Afghans living in northern Vermont between Montpelier, the greater Burlington area. I'm going to put Rutland in northern Vermont, although I guess they're kind of in the middle, Hartford, St. Albans, and then close to 300 between Manchester, Brattleboro, and Bennington. I don't have access to that data. That would probably be a question for the Agency of Education, or Department of Education, or Tracy Dolan, who serves at the state level. I would say that the majority, at least in the greater Burlington area, of individuals are men who are here on their own, still waiting for children and whites to come. So I'm sorry I don't have specific numbers.
Excuse me, what criteria is the administration talking about for sending people to Guantanamo? I can't understand that.
The answer to that question is far above my pay grade. I don't know. I don't know if it's certain populations that would then go on to Central America. I think that there was an initial claim that it would be individuals who had a criminal background, but then I don't think that's true. I think that there's been many individuals who don't have a criminal background. I don't know. I just know that, I'll tell you something quite personal. My first job after I worked for Senator Welch, then Congressman Welch in Washington, was working for the International Committee of the Red Cross, an organization that works all around the world. They have as their mandate the Geneva Conventions. If I say Geneva Conventions, everyone knows what I'm talking about. International humanitarian law, laws of war. And the Geneva Conventions mandate that the ICRC be able to visit detainees held any place in conflict. So the colleagues I worked with visited the detainees at Guantanamo every 6 weeks, and they still go every 6 weeks because there are still detainees there. And my job was to talk to Congress about upholding the Geneva Conventions at Guantanamo during that time. Never, ever could I have imagined a world where Afghans who worked for the US government, who were evacuated to the United States, would somehow end up at Guantanamo, granted under different circumstances, but can you imagine reading that headline if you're here in the United States and you don't really understand the context and you're from Afghanistan? It's just the fear, the confusion, the like, how is this possible? So we've had to do a lot of explaining. It's just bizarre.
Hi, Molly. I wonder if you could, aside from the driving and English lessons, talk a little more about what the Alliance is doing with the women.
Yes, thank you. I will be very transparent that when we first opened our office, and actually still today, it's very tough to have women come in as clients. And we were like, why is this? What is it that we're doing, or what is it that we have set up that's just not working? Because we do have program officers who are women. We do have places to park. We serve tea and nuts and have safe spaces. But there was, I think, two things going on. One, a little bit of a trust issue, like who is this organization and what are they doing? And then two, not really meeting women where they're at, which may not be finding a way to get into a car that you might not have because you don't have a driver's license, or your husband's got the car and he's at work, and getting into Burlington to get to our office. So an incredible group of women volunteers in the greater Burlington community, including Ellen, came together, and it's called Women for Afghan Women. And we hosted a weekend gathering of Afghan women and children to try to start understanding what were the needs, like what's going on, what do you need? And then we went to the Vermont Women's Fund and said, we want to do an economic needs assessment. We want to go and meet women in their homes and talk to them in their language that's comfortable. So contracted with an Afghan woman named Mahtab, who's studying at the Grossman School of Business at UVM, who ran her own construction company in Afghanistan, to meet with women, to interview them, to understand their needs, and then to create a 4-part educational series on the areas of interest, needs coming out of the interviews. And to do that with childcare in the evenings, with transportation, so that it was truly accessible. And the 4 issues were how to start a small business. I want to start my catering company. I want to start a clothing line. How to buy a car. And we had a woman come in who works at different car auctions, a woman come in from a dealership. It was really awesome. That was one of the most interesting sessions. One on financial literacy, also how to buy a home, and then digital literacy, like how do you use this thing? And how do you not become a victim of a scam? So it was a great start. We still have a lot of work to do to create programming that is truly accessible to women who are very, very isolated. And if you have a particular interest in working with women, please reach out, because the work doesn't happen in the office. It happens more often in people's homes. Yeah. Thanks, Ellen.
Hi. I'm finding your talk very interesting, but I have maybe a small correction if I'm right. I think I heard you say you're in Shelburne, but you're really in South Burlington.
I'm so busted. I am so busted, thank you. Where is the line? South of here. I am proudly in South Burlington. Thank you. I grew up in Newberry. If anyone said you're in Bradford, I would have been like.
The people assigned to the people in Burlington, Vermont, did they have a choice to come here, or were they arbitrarily assigned to this area or other areas?
Yeah. I would like to think that everyone said, I know I want to move to Vermont, but I know that was not the case. When the big evacuation happened in August of 2021, it was called Enduring Allies Welcome, OAW, Operation Allies Welcome. And these big, I'm going to go back to the pictures, these big military planes arrived at military bases all across the country, in Wisconsin, Virginia, Texas, Nebraska, and these camps were set up as temporary staging for many Afghan arrivals before different resettlement agencies started accepting them. I actually haven't asked anyone, did you choose Vermont? Or like, did you Google Vermont? Now what I know is that folks who move to Vermont from other parts of the country, they're choosing to come here. They're choosing to come here because they have a family member, a relative, or a friend of a friend, or our Google reviews are really great. I don't really know, but they're choosing to come, and that's been exciting to see people reach out and say, you know, we're here, and you know, can you help us find a job?
One of the questions I had was, actually I have two, was how do you find housing across the state in the different areas? And the second would be what the employment possibilities are and what the background of employment was for the individuals in Afghanistan, and how did they get to the 19,000 jobs, of which I'm not really sure how this distribution of those jobs are.
Yeah. Housing is so challenging. Everybody knows that. I'm sure. I think the biggest challenge that we see is that for some of the families the families are bigger. I mean, Afghan families traditionally 5, 7, 10. And if you have one income earner, because mom's at home, it's hard to find a house, or even a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment that can be afforded on a salary of 40, 50, 60,000. And that's where the employment piece comes in, right? So if we know someone is committed to learning English, and let's say they were an engineer in Afghanistan, how can we connect them with Beta and try to find the jobs where there's good benefits, where they're fitting into a position where they have a longer trajectory, and really trying to break up what is sort of like the emergency employment that has often happened, where individuals are like stuck in a factory where they just want to work second shift because they know they can make, $21 instead of $18 an hour, but are working, midnight to 9 a.m. or 3 in the afternoon to 1 a.m., 60 hours a week. It's just like it's not sustainable over time. We really try, Yassine, who you'll see here, sort of, the Afghan Employment Program Officer, we've had to work really closely with him to find other individuals who can support his work. So our Supreme Court Justice, for example, who's looking for legal work that she can do, not as a Supreme Court Justice here in Vermont, but I've been working to find, are there courts in Vermont who need an administrator? And that just takes like extra work. It's not, calling some of our businesses and saying, will you employ this person? And so employment coaches are helpful. That's a great volunteer opportunity if you want to work with some Afghan women who need some employment coaching or additional help in finding the right jobs. But it's a lot of network building, a lot of working with other organizations who help with employment placement, and just a lot of like employment coaching. And there's a tremendous amount of need. And it's time consuming. It's not just like, here's your resume and good luck. Yeah. Oh, I just want to make sure you get the microphone, Linda. I think we have time. This may be our last
Excuse me,
last
you alluded
question.
to 300 refugees one area, 300 another. What is the total in Vermont?
600.
Okay, that's what
But it could be
I
more.
did quick math, but I wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
it was someone.
Good. I think we have time
I think
for one more
unless we
question.
have one more question. Okay.
Do you have some kind of training program for volunteers?
Right now, we meet with volunteers directly and do an intake. We don't have a training program. We need a training program, and we need a volunteer who wants to run the training program. But I really, really want to thank you for your interest today, for taking time to come and learn and listen. Please share what you learned with anyone who will listen. Be proud, I hope, of this work that Vermont's doing, that all of you, I hope, will get involved in some way. Raise awareness, chip in if you can, volunteer, and keep helping to make Vermont a really welcoming place, because in this moment we need that. We really do. So thank you.
This was wonderful. Thanks, Molly.